Imagine staring down at a patch of the ocean floor that looks like a desolate moonscape. No color, no movement, just endless gray silt stretching out into the deep blue. This was the reality for vast stretches of the Australian coastline, where once lush underwater forests had vanished, leaving behind a silent, empty space. But then, a group of scientists decided to do something that sounded completely crazy. They didn't just plant a few seeds or release some fish. No, they took 700 tons of seaweed and dumped it directly onto that empty seabed. It looked like a massive underwater trash heap at first, a giant brown tangle of salt and slime. But what that 700 tons of organic material did to that quiet, barren environment was something no one truly saw coming. It wasn't just a cleanup mission. It was a biological explosion that rewrote the rules of ocean restoration. To understand why this was such a high-stakes gamble, we have to talk about what happened to the Australian coast in the first place. For decades, rising water temperatures and shifting currents had been wiping out the giant kelp forests. These forests are the cathedrals of the sea. They provide shelter, food, and oxygen for thousands of species. When they disappeared, the entire neighborhood moved out. The fish left. The lobsters vanished, and the vibrant life that makes the ocean so magical just faded away. We were left with what scientists call urchin barrens, places where the balance has shifted so far that nothing but a few spiny shadows can survive. So, the plan was bold. Most people think of restoration as a delicate, painstaking process like gardening with tweezers. But the team behind this project realized that the ocean is a massive system, and sometimes it needs a massive jolt. They gathered 700 tons of harvested seaweed, specifically species that were abundant elsewhere, and transported them to the most degraded patches of the coast. The idea was to create an instant habitat. They weren't waiting for nature to grow back over 20 years. They were trying to drop a fully functional ecosystem into place in 24 hours. As the massive barges tipped their cargo over the side, the sight was overwhelming. Huge clouds of brown and green kelp spiraled down through the water column, settling in giant piles on the silt. To a casual observer, it looked like a disaster. It looked like someone was polluting the ocean with compost. But beneath the surface, a miracle was beginning to stir. Within hours, not days, hours, the first residents started to arrive. It turns out that in the ocean, if you build it, they will come, isn't just a movie quote. It's a biological law. Small crustaceans, tiny shrimp, and microscopic organisms that had been drifting aimlessly in the currents suddenly had a place to hide. They tucked themselves into the tangled fronds of the dumped seaweed. And where there are small things to eat, the bigger things follow. Within the first week, schools of small fish began to hover around these new underwater islands. They used the seaweed piles as a fortress, a place to navigate away from the open water where they were vulnerable. The empty ocean floor was suddenly buzzing with the sound of life, the clicks, pops, and hums of a community being reborn. But the most unexpected thing wasn't just the return of the fish. It was what the seaweed did to the chemistry of the water itself. You see, seaweed is a powerhouse of carbon sequestration. As that 700 tons of material sat on the seabed, it began to act like a massive filter. It absorbed excess nutrients from the water, nutrients that often cause harmful algal blooms, and locked them away. Even better, as the seaweed began to slowly break down, it didn't just rot. It turned into a rich, nutrient-dense marine snow that fed the sediment. The gray, dusty silt started to transform into a dark, fertile soil. This was the foundation for new, permanent life. The weight of the seaweed also had a physical benefit that the scientists hadn't fully calculated. It stabilized the seabed. In areas where the bottom was constantly being churned up by currents, making it impossible for new seedlings to take root, the 700 tons of kelp acted like a heavy blanket. It calmed the mini-currents at the very bottom, creating a nursery-like environment. Small, naturally occurring kelp spores that were floating by finally had a stable place to latch onto. The dumped seaweed was acting as a protector for the natural seaweed that wanted to return. As the months went by, the transformation became even more dramatic. Scientists diving on the site reported seeing species they hadn't seen in that area for decades. Rare seahorses were found clinging to the fronds. Octopuses had turned the gaps between the piles into their private dens, peeking out at the world with curious eyes. The biodiversity didn't just creep back, it surged. It was a complete reversal of the trend of degradation. It showed that the ocean has an incredible capacity to heal if we provide the right catalyst. But let's talk about the scale of this for a second. 700 tons is an immense amount of material. It required a fleet of ships, heavy machinery, and a level of coordination usually reserved for offshore oil drilling. This was industrial-scale conservation. For a long time, the environmental movement has focused on small, localized efforts. While those are important, this Australian project proved that we need big swings to fix big problems. We are losing habitat at a rate that tweezers can't keep up with. We need the sledgehammer approach of dumping 700 tons of life-giving material into the blue. One of the most fascinating observations from the research teams was the halo effect of the project. The life didn't stay confined to the seaweed piles. Because the fish had a safe home base to return to, they began to venture further out into the surrounding areas to forage. This meant that the influence of the 700 tons of seaweed extended for miles in every direction. It was like a new city had been built in the middle of a desert, and now the suburbs were starting to grow. The fishing industry in the nearby region actually started to report better catches, not because they were fishing the restoration site, but because the site was acting as a massive fish factory that was pumping new life into the entire coastal system. Wait, it gets even more interesting when you look at the long-term sustainability. People worried that once the dumped seaweed eventually decomposed, the life would leave. But that's not what happened. By the time the original 700 tons had broken down, they had already served their purpose as a bridge. They had stayed long enough for the natural kelp forests to re-establish themselves. The new, living forest had grown through the mulch of the old seaweed. It was a perfect handoff from human intervention to natural recovery. The project also changed how we think about waste. Much of the seaweed used was actually drift kelp that had washed up on beaches elsewhere or was being cleared from navigation channels. Instead of letting it rot on land and release carbon back into the atmosphere, the team put it back where it belonged. They turned a beach cleanup problem into an ocean restoration solution. This circular thinking is the future of ecology. We are learning that the ocean's own trash is actually its greatest treasure. Imagine being one of the divers who saw the before and after. They described the before as walking through a ghost town, the kind of place where you feel the absence of life as a physical weight. The after was more like being in the middle of a carnival. The colors were back: vibrant oranges, deep purples, and neon greens. The water was clearer because the seaweed was filtering out the particulates, and the sheer density of life was staggering. You couldn't move your hand without nearly touching a curious fish or a waving anemone. The success of this Australian project has sent ripples through the global scientific community. Now countries all over the world are looking at their own empty coastal zones and wondering if they need a big dump of their own. Whether it's seagrass in the Mediterranean or kelp in the Pacific, the principle is the same. Nature isn't just looking for a helping hand, it's looking for a foundation. It's looking for the raw materials it needs to rebuild. But why did it work so well here specifically? The Australian coast is a place of extremes. The currents are powerful, and the weather can be brutal. Traditional restoration methods often fail because the young plants get ripped out before they can get a grip. The 700-ton approach worked because it used mass to fight mass. It used the weight of the collective to survive the power of the ocean. It's a lesson in physics as much as it is in biology. Sometimes, more really is more. This project also highlights the importance of blue carbon. Everyone talks about planting trees to soak up carbon dioxide, and that's great. But seaweed can grow 30 times faster than land plants. It is one of the most efficient carbon capture machines ever designed by evolution. By dumping 700 tons of it into the ocean, the scientists weren't just helping fish, they were helping the planet breathe. They were creating a sunken carbon vault that will keep those gases out of the atmosphere for a very long time. The unexpected part of the story, as the title suggests, was the speed. Most scientists expected to see results over a decade. They didn't expect to see a fully functioning reef system in under 2 years. The pace of recovery was so fast that it challenged our understanding of carrying capacity. It turns out that the ocean floor wasn't empty because it couldn't support life. It was empty because it didn't have a way to start. It was like a car with a full tank of gas but no spark plug. The seaweed was the spark. One of the coolest things to see in the footage from the site is the way the octopuses began to manipulate the seaweed. They are incredibly intelligent, and they started weaving the fronds together to create more secure entrances for their homes. They were literally interior designing the restoration site. When you see wild animals taking an active role in maintaining a human-built project, you know you've succeeded. It's no longer a project at that point. It's just the ocean being the ocean again. The local community's response was another unexpected win. Initially, there was skepticism. People were worried about seaweed littering their beautiful coastline. But when the residents saw the fish returning and the water getting clearer, their attitude shifted completely. They became the guardians of the site. Local boaters began to volunteer their time to monitor the area, and schools started using the project as a real-world classroom. It turned a scientific experiment into a point of local pride. It showed that people want to be part of big, ambitious nature projects if they can see the results with their own eyes. As we look at the future of our oceans, a project like this provides a blueprint for hope. We are constantly inundated with stories about everything we've lost. But here is a story about what we can get back. It requires big thinking, a bit of bravery, and a lot of seaweed. It shows that we don't have to just sit back and watch the ocean floor fade away. We have the tools and the materials to bring it back to life. Wait, there's an even deeper layer to this. The scientists discovered that the presence of the 700 tons of seaweed changed the local acoustics. Sound travels differently through a kelp forest than it does over an empty plain. Many fish and crustacean larvae actually find their way home by listening to the sound of a healthy reef, the crackling of shrimp and the low hum of fish. By adding the seaweed, the scientists essentially turned the radio station of the reef back on. They were sending out a signal across the miles, telling all the drifting babies of the ocean that there was a safe place to land. This acoustic restoration is a cutting-edge field of study. We used to think that animals just bumped into habitats by accident. Now we know they are actively searching for them using all their senses. The 700 tons of seaweed wasn't just a visual landmark. It was a beacon of sound. It was the loudest, most welcoming neighborhood on the coast. And once that signal started playing, the ocean responded in force. Think about the sheer variety of life that was supported. It wasn't just a few species of fish. It was sponges, bryozoans, soft corals, and incredible varieties of sea snails. The seaweed provided a multi-story apartment building. The top layers near the sun were for the fast-moving fish and the photosynthesis junkies. The middle layers provided a maze of protection from predators. And the bottom, where the seaweed met the silt, became a rich nursery for the crawlers and the hiders. Every inch of that 700 tons was being utilized. The weight of the seaweed also helped with something called coastal buffering. During big storms, the energy of the waves can hit the shore with incredible force, causing erosion. A healthy kelp forest acts like a giant, underwater shock absorber. It breaks up the energy of the waves before they reach the beach. By dumping this massive amount of seaweed, the team created a temporary barrier that protected the shoreline while the new, permanent forest had time to take root. It was a win for the ocean and a win for the land. Looking at the data, the numbers are just as impressive as the visuals. The biomass in the restoration area increased by something like 400% in the first 18 months. That's an insane rate of growth. If you saw a forest on land grow that much in 18 months, you'd think it was a miracle. But in the nutrient-rich waters of Australia, with the right foundation, it's just what nature does. It reminded everyone that the ocean is much more liquid and dynamic than land. Everything moves faster, grows faster, and recovers faster if you give it the chance. But let's talk about the what if. What if they hadn't done it? The area would likely still be a gray, silent moonscape. The urchins would have continued to roam, preventing anything from growing. The fish populations would have continued to dwindle. The dump was a disruption of a negative cycle. It was a circuit breaker for environmental decline. And that's a powerful lesson. Sometimes you have to disrupt the system to save it. You have to be willing to do something that looks messy, to get to something that is beautiful. The success has also opened up new funding for marine restoration. For a long time, it was hard to get people excited about seaweed. It's not as charismatic as a whale or a dolphin, but when you can show people a vibrant, bustling city of life that was created from 700 tons of trash, they get it. They see the value. They understand that the seaweed is the infrastructure that makes the rest of the ocean possible. You can't have the whales and the dolphins without the kelp forests to feed the fish they eat. The researchers are now looking at ways to optimize the dump. They are experimenting with different mixtures of seaweed species to see which ones attract specific types of fish. They are looking at the architecture of the piles to see if certain shapes provide better shelter for lobsters or crabs. It's becoming a new branch of engineering, ecosystem engineering. We are learning how to build nature with the same precision we used to build bridges or skyscrapers. And let's be clear, this didn't just help the good animals. It helped the whole system, even the decomposers, the things that eat the junk. saw a massive boost. This created a healthy base for the food chain. A lot of restoration projects fail because they only focus on the top of the chain, like releasing big fish into an area with no food. This project worked because it started at the bottom. It provided the habitat and the food first and let the rest take care of itself. As the years move on, the 700 tons of seaweed will be long gone, merged back into the atoms of the ocean. But the life it started will remain. The grandchildren of the first fish to find that pile will still be swimming in the descendants of the kelp that took root in its shadow. That is the true measure of success. It's not about how long the project lasts. It's about the permanent change it leaves behind. It's about the fact that a patch of the ocean that was empty is now a permanent home. The unexpected results didn't just stop at the water's edge either. Scientists found that the increased bird life on the nearby shore was directly linked to the restoration project. More fish in the water meant more food for the gulls, terns, and eagles. The dump was feeding the sky just as much as it was feeding the sea. It was a reminder that nature doesn't have boundaries. A healthy ocean means a healthy coastline, which means a healthy atmosphere. One of the divers mentioned in an interview that the most incredible part was the smell of the recovery. While we don't usually think of smelling things underwater, they described a change in the feel and the scent of the water, from a stagnant, metallic emptiness to a rich, salty, vibrant breath of life. It's that feeling of being in a forest versus being in a parking lot. Your body just knows when an environment is healthy. This Australian project is a call to action. It shows that we have the power to be a force for nature, rather than just a force of nature in the negative sense. We can use our industrial capacity, our logistics, and our ships to heal. We can move mountains, or 700 tons of seaweed to make things right. It's a bold, messy, beautiful vision of the future. The insanity of dumping all that seaweed is now being viewed as pure genius. It was a calculated risk that paid off in dividends of biodiversity and carbon capture. It proved that the ocean floor is not a lost cause. It's a canvas. And with the right materials, we can paint a masterpiece of life back onto it. The gray silt is gone, the vibrant greens are back, and the silence has been replaced by the bustling noise of a thriving community. As we look across the globe, at all the places where the ocean has gone quiet, we can look to this project for inspiration. It tells us that it's not too late. It tells us that we have the ingredients for recovery. They might just be washing up on our beaches or floating in our harbors. We just need the courage to pick them up and put them back where they belong. We need to be willing to dump our preconceived notions of how restoration should look and embrace the power of the massive. The 700 tons of seaweed were a gift to the ocean, and the ocean responded with a show of gratitude that exceeded everyone's expectations. It brought back the seahorses, the octopuses, the fish, and the birds. It cleaned the water and stabilized the earth. It showed us that under the waves, magic is just waiting for a place to grow. And sometimes, that place is a giant pile of kelp on a dusty seabed. So next time you see a tangle of seaweed on the beach, don't look at it as trash. Look at it as a potential city. Look at it as a carbon vault. Look at it as the building block of a new world. Because in Australia, they proved that 700 tons of that trash can bring an entire ocean back to life. It was unexpected, it was insane, and it was exactly what the planet needed. The ocean floor is no longer a silent grave, it's a bustling nursery, all because someone had the crazy idea to dump a little bit of green back into the blue. The researchers are still out there, monitoring the site every month. They are finding that the new forest is even more resilient than the old one was. Because it grew back in the current climate conditions, these plants are battle-hardened. They are better adapted to the warmer waters and the changing currents. This is a concept called future-proofing. By helping nature restart now, we are giving it the tools it needs to survive the challenges of the next century. The story of the 700 tons is a story about the scale of our ambition. We have spent centuries taking from the ocean at a massive scale. It only makes sense that we should start giving back at the same scale. We need more 700-ton projects. We need more barges filled with life. We need more scientists willing to get their hands dirty and their wetsuits slimy to rebuild the world. In the quiet moments under the waves, where the golden light filters through the new kelp fronds, you can see the future of conservation. It's not a fence, it's a foundation. It's not a keep out sign, it's a welcome home mat. And that mat is made of seaweed. Lots and lots of seaweed. As the shadows of fish dance over the seabed that was once a moonscape, the lesson is clear. We can fix this. We can bring back the color. We can bring back the life. And it all starts with one bold move. The ocean floor in that part of Australia is now a testament to human ingenuity and natural resilience. It's a place where the unexpected became the reality. From a barren to a brilliant ecosystem, the journey of the 700 tons of seaweed is a reminder that beauty can come from the most unlikely places. And as the kelp continues to wave in the current, it seems to be saying one thing: we're back, and we're here to stay. This project is also a reminder that we are the keystone species of the planet now. Our actions determine the fate of millions of other lives. When we act with the intention to restore, the results can be breathtaking. The 700 tons were a small price to pay for the return of an entire coastal ecosystem. It's an investment that will pay off for decades, creating a healthier, more vibrant world for us and for the creatures of the deep. As the sun sets over the Australian coast, casting a long shadow over the water, we know that beneath that surface, the city of life is still buzzing. The lights aren't out, they're just getting started. The seaweed is growing, the fish are hunting, and the ocean is breathing. Everything is exactly as it should be, and that is perhaps the most unexpected thing of all. That in a world of constant change and loss, we actually found a way to win. We found a way to bring it all back, and all it took was 700 tons of seaweed and a dream of a greener, bluer world. The path forward is clear. We have the blueprint, we have the evidence, we have the seaweed. Now we just need the will to keep going, to keep dumping, to keep building, and to keep believing in the power of nature to surprise us. Because as those Australian scientists found out, when you give the ocean 700 tons of life, it gives you back a miracle in return. And that's a story worth telling over and over again. From the smallest shrimp to the largest eagle, the message is the same. The recovery has begun, and it's going to be absolutely spectacular. Looking at the map of the coastline, you can now see the green spots where the work was done. They stand out against the gray surrounding areas like beacons of hope. They are the seeds of a new coastline, the starting points for a global movement. We are watching the rebirth of the sea, 1 ton at a time. And every time a new barge heads out into the blue, carrying its cargo of kelp, we are one step closer to a planet that is whole again. The story is ongoing, the results are insane, and the future is bright. The ocean is calling, and we finally have a way to answer. The 700 tons of seaweed have changed the world, not just for the animals that live in it, but for the humans who watch over it. They have shown us that nature is not our enemy to be conquered, but our partner to be supported. In the dance of the kelp fronds, we see the rhythm of a healthy planet, a rhythm that we helped restore. And that is a legacy that will last much longer than any pile of seaweed. It is the legacy of a new way of living on Earth, where we give more than we take, and where we celebrate the unexpected return of life to every corner of our beautiful, blue home.